Hello everyone, today I'm working on this 464. It's a Con-Cor made by Kato, and this thing didn't do well at the auction simply because it's missing the pilot truck here. So that's not really good. I'm going to go through all the parts that could fall off during its life when it was used. I mean, this thing was new at one time. So it's got its coupler, that's good. The excenter crank, that can fall off, so that's good. We'll check the other side. The bell also, you can remove that. These two ladders can fall off. It's got the other excenter crank, so that's good. And this engine's gone through several phases. They had some for the Rail Baron collection. Those run good. They just have the blackened wheels. That's how you can tell. One of the pins here is missing. It can still run like that. You could barely notice it. And what else can happen here? Everything else seems to be there. Everything looks to be in good shape, though this wheel looks to be very dirty. Yeah, that's pretty dirty. Same with this. So that doesn't help run the engine. And that's why this engine is so awesome, because it picks up electricity from the tender. And then two wheels from the trailing truck, two wheels from the pilot truck, and then all these wheels pick up electricity. And there should be traction tires on these, yeah. In the front, there's two traction tires. All right, so let's dig right in. The valve gear on this is not super crazy detail, but it's got stuff where it counts. I mean, this thing looks beautiful going down the track. To remove the shell is just one screw here on the top. Then let's see if that will do it. And make sure just that the screw comes out. Use gravity as your friend there. I try to really get it out before I pull too hard on the shell. Now these wires here, you need them, so you want to be careful. Make sure that they stick around. Okay, so I've got my shell. I've got my shell out. Oh yeah, this thing's been played with a little bit, but it's not in bad shape. And then that screw just wants to stay in there. That's okay, I'm gonna leave it. And you can see the little bell. That can come out. Then you have to be careful not to lose it. It's very small. Seems to be a brass part, so that's very cool. And these come out and they can be lost. I'm glad I have this one. That is some cool stuff. It's no bigger than a grain of dust. Oh, my little wire's disconnected. So that's awesome. I'm going to show you guys how to fix that. Happens a lot actually. They put a little bit of tape just to manage the wires. That's okay. The counterweight, we're not going to need it for a little bit. That's okay. That really doesn't do anything, so I'm going to chuck that. So you cannot solder the wire directly to the motor, because the soldering is too hot and it will melt your commutator box. So you have to be careful when you do that. So far so good. We got something to repair. Oh, and I thought the tender looked kind of funny because it's on backwards. Should be on like so. But that's no big deal. And then we'll just take a look at the connections on here too. There's two little tabs that hold the weight down. Once I have this off, the tender is going to be much lighter and much easier to handle. Much easier to handle. Yeah, these connections look good. I won't have to redo that. just this one. Perfect. All right, so now I need to get the motor out of there. It's not super hard to do it. You just have to go one step at a time. I have to remove this plate here to put the new pilot truck on. So that I'll take it off. To get to the motor, I need to remove the wheels anyways. You notice there's only one magnet that's been painted white. So when we put it back, we gotta make sure we put it back the same orientation. You can see the plate here, it's cracked a little bit. That happens, it won't prevent it from running. This thing, it's probably 30, maybe even 40 years old. I'm not even sure when they first were introduced. I got mine in 1990, so that was a while back. But that engine's been with me all that time. So this little plate has, I'm gonna put the screws back to it. You can see it's cracked a little bit. That's not the end of the world. This little plate has brake detail, which is very cool. And then we can remove the wheels from here. Let me grab my smallest screwdriver. I don't know if you guys noticed, but they're starting to have ads for pre-ordering the FEF3 now. So I'm definitely interested in that. So yes, there's a little pin here, tiny little pin, which is not where it should be on the other side. But that little pin, very easy to lose that. I don't necessarily blame the other guy that had it before for losing it. It's pretty tricky, and you have your center crank here. That, I suppose it could just stay there. It won't bother me. But you just have to be very careful not to lose it. And also, when we put it back together, be very mindful of that. Let me just give you a close-up of this. I'm interested in this because I want to know if it's got traction tires or no. It's pretty dirty. But no traction tires on the number 3 driver. That's going to need a good cleaning though. And it's got its 2 bearings. That's one reason why it runs so nice. It's the 2 bearings. And same with this, it's got its bearings. We're going to take that apart and clean it up later. And this one it can keep its pins, and it can keep the 2 connecting rods. But this one I think has the traction tires. Yes, so number 1 driver has traction tires. So engines have layers, just like onions. So we're just gonna keep peeling back the layers until we get to the motor. And that should just lift out. I'm gonna put the screw right back in it so that I knew which screw goes where. A lot of these screws look alike, but they have different lengths. So it's good to keep track of that. And then we're gonna remove the cylinders. You have to get under here and pry gently on these pins here. You have to start them with your X-Acto blade because there's no clearance. Kato stuff, it fits so well. Everything fits so well together. So I'm gonna do it. I have to do it under magnification, but I'm gonna do it. It is still a little bit dirty. You just need to make just enough clearance to get your blade under there, your screwdriver blade, and then you pry on it very gently. And then they come out on the side. Just go one step at a time. When the crosshead just comes out in the front like that, gives you a bit more space to work. They just come to the side like that. There's some fine detail on there, so you don't want to pull from the outside, you want to pry from the inside. There we go. So these are your main rods that can go to the side. Same with that. And then there's a little bit of stuff to remove from the front yet. I'm being careful not to exert too much pressure on these wires because they really help. So this little retainer that will hold the worm gear in place. So that's a really good part, you need that. Wow, we almost got it all apart now. So then, 2 Phillips head screws gets your frame apart. This little guy right here, that's just a spacer, but it's real good to have it. Now that's a split frame. As far as I know, one of the very first engines to have a split frame. Yes, this one is just a spacer. Let's have a look at it. And then gently spread them apart. And that's it. And they have plastic sleeves also. So I'm keeping all this stuff together. The screws and the plastic sleeves. I keep them together. You have a set of gears here. And then a reducer gear for the 2 idlers. So that's about it for that. Your engine's all been taken apart. Now you have to get these contact strips, you have to get them out, and that's a little bit tricky. That is a little bit tricky. I don't have the proper tool for this, and I should get one. Why this is so tricky, actually wasn't that hard to get to, is because I have to take the little contact strip out, and that is tied up with your motor brushes. If you want to replace your motor brushes, that's what you got to do. And it's tricky because there's a little spring in there. If you lose that spring, you're in bad shape. Let's just take a look at that. If I were going to change the brushes, it would be now. Yeah, that brush is still good, and you can see the little spring in there. That, if you lose that, you're in bad shape. It still works good though. So we're going to be careful with that. I have to pull the little contact pin out. However much time this takes, it's okay. When you're working on your N-scale engines, you have to tell yourself, I have all the time in the world. You also have to make time. Don't get started on that if you have just a minute. It's okay. Oh, did you see that flying off? Fortunately, that's a big part. It's going to be easy to track it down. My sleeve caught it. So this, I'm going to mark it just a little bit so my soldering has a chance to have something to grab onto. So we're just going to make a little mark so I don't have to come and do that again. Just little marks so my soldering has something to grab onto. Yeah, getting back to the big boy pre-orders, they got a nice web page on the Kato website. You just type in N-Scale Kato F3 F3 and it'll pop up. Not F3 F3. Just type in Kato big boy and it will pop up. So that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare that. I'm going to pre-tin it. That's going to be my next step. I'm going to pre-tin it and then I'll bring my wire in. Yeah, if I didn't like doing that, I'd probably find another hobby. I just like to fix stuff. Just before I did that, I went for a nice little walk. And also, I had to fix my sump pump for my apartment building. The trick is to let it get hot. Also, a clean surface helps. And enough flux. This is the resin core solder. I may have to clean it some more because it is hot enough. They have the pricing out. It's $2.99 with DC only, and there's a DCC version, no sound, which is $3.99, and DCC and sound is $4.99. Just to compare it with the FEF3. Oh yeah, that looks perfect. Just to compare it with the FEF3, the FEF3, the pricing they have on right now is DC 275, DCC 360, and DCC and sound 475, so $25 less. If you end up waiting instead of pre-ordering, you might be able to save a little bit of money. You can sandwich angling it right. Actually, I'm going to want that. Oh, that can go like that. That's going to be fine. So I'm just angling it correctly. I'm also going to line up everything. I might have to retin this one too. So if you try to do that with the strip on the motor, you get in trouble because it's too hot. It's going to melt the box, the little box there. That too, I'm going to retin it. And that is basically the secret soldering. You gotta have enough heat, and you gotta have enough flux, and then everything will just go together. I need to get this perfect because I don't want to redo this in 2 weeks. I'm gonna put just a little bit more solder on there. So these come apart when you're handling the engine. They're not super fragile, but it's still good to mind it. That looks real good to me. So I'm not pre-ordering my big boy because I'm gonna wait for the prices to come down a little bit. For example, the FEF3, the suggested retail price is $299, and I've seen some for, I forgot which order these came in. So, okay, so it's this thing first, and then the little contact pin, and then we bring in the motor brush. And I never did try this out, so I better try it out before I reinstall it in the engine. That would make a lot of sense. That's another thing, when you do that, you really do have to tell yourself, I have all the time in the world. And while I'm doing that, I have to be very careful not to lose the little spring. But the end scale, it's fun, but it's not fun, you know. It's fun because you know what you've got, you know how hard it was to get there. But it's not fun because if you do lose something, then you're in big trouble. There's replacement parts around. I went on the Plaza Japan website, and the exchange rate is favorable with the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. So if you need to get replacement parts like springs, they have generic springs. You can do what you want with them, including use them for brush springs. I bet you they have brushes too, because the Japanese Kato motors are almost the same as the American ones. So I've got to test it. Actually, it makes sense to do the testing now because I had to fool around with the motor brushes. I have to make sure I put them back correctly. It's so beautiful. Actually, let's test out the wiring at the same time. I want to give you a different angle so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm testing out the voltage, the wiring at the same time. So quiet. I'm running it at the lowest setting on my power pack. There we go. So quiet. I get hypnotized by this. That is such a good feeling. All right, so now we can put everything back together. Before I put all that back together, I am going to do a little bit of wheel cleaning. So I got to remove the trucks to get me access to the wheels. That is going to be a good runner. They're a little bit tricky to come out, these trucks. But it's worth doing it. You know, this is like 30, 40 years old, and that plastic is still movable. It will move rather than break, well, to a certain degree. Not super easy to get them out. But I've done it before, so I know it can be done. Here we go. So the pin can stay there, that's fine. I'll just remove one wheel at a time to clean them. And let's get one that's especially ugly. Yes, this one. This one is especially ugly. Just gonna run my nail on the side there. Look at that grime. The rest of the cleaning I do with my rag and my nail, that is a proven method. There's probably more than one method. There's a machine they sell you with integrated brush. Yeah, so the retail price of the FEF3 right now is $275. I've seen them online for $200, so you can save $75 by waiting, which is gonna be my thing to do for the big boy. One interesting coincidence, it's gonna come out just in time for Christmas. But I got a lot of patience. I'll wait so I can get a little bit of a rebate on it. You know what engine I wish they would reintroduce is the 282, the heavy Kato. That is also a good runner. So I like to do them one at a time like this because it holds the little contact strips. It holds them in there. So you do have to pay attention and line them up properly. But that is the best method I found for cleaning the wheels. That's got a little bit of mileage on it. That is good. That's good. I'm glad somebody enjoyed it. I'm going to enjoy it again. Just like the railroads did, they would rebuild them to you know, the last engine I did, the Canadian National, they bought these in 1920 and they ran them until 1959. So they definitely got their money's worth out of that. "29 years of service. And some of them got preserved and some of them are still running. You guys know what? There's not that many steam engines around anymore because the maintenance was too expensive. Sometimes they say the cost of restoration on these steam engines, it's in the hundreds of thousands. That is amazing. So I'm going to keep cleaning this off camera, but you get the picture. So if you have one of these and it's not running super well, that is the first place to check. Look at how nasty this is. That is disgusting. It was just about black. One time I had my engine apart like that. I took a picture, I put that on Facebook, and I asked all my friends, I forgot how to put it back together, can you help me? And then everybody says, forget it. I'm not gonna help you with that. I don't know how. So at this point, I'm going to wash everything with some dish soap and my toothbrush. As I put it back together, I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication back in it. Just to say that I did something. Just one drop is all you need. And then I'm going to reintroduce the gears. And that's that. As you clean your wheels, try to keep them in order. I could just lubricate the little bearings and that would be good enough. But I'm going to spread them apart. And I'm going to remove the gear from them. Oh, it's tight in there. And you can see here it's a little bit dirty on the inside. So I'm going to take my little bearing out and I'm going to clean the wheel and I'm going to clean the bearing and I'll put them back together. You can see how the bearing started to wear the wheel. That's okay. All part of the game. And I also cleaned the outside using my rag. This is the number 3 driver. I can clearly see it's got traction tires. Interesting. I cleaned my little bearing as best I could. I'm going to put it back together. Just one drop is all you need. And then I'm going to clean the gear and put the gear back on. So intensive cleaning like that you would only do once every few years. Are you guys like me? Do you have like 2 engines? Do you have a bunch of engines that you run all the time? You can maybe put that in the comments below. Do you have 1 engine that you run all the time, or do you have a bunch of engines? Yeah, that feels great. All right, I'll clean the other wheel. My camera's not focusing that well. But yeah, squeaky clean. I'll clean the other wheel. Now this little shaft here is square. So that helps you because you want to quarter your drivers. You want them to be a quarter turn apart. So let's say this side is like that. The other side should be like this, a quarter turn apart. So let's check this one just to be sure. So this one is down. So the next one, easy to get confused with this. So you guys can have a better look. So this side is down. And this side is up. What? Let's do that again. So this one is down. And that one is up. That can't be right. They should be a quarter turn apart. So let's just redo them. Maybe somebody played with this engine. Because you know when you do the dance, the locomotions, your arms, they move 180 degrees apart. But the steam locomotive is 45 degrees apart. So there you go. This one's down. This one's toward the front. That makes a lot more sense. So we'll do the same thing with this one. So if this side is down, this one should be a quarter turn apart. That, and it's a square shaft. So you can only do it like that. Double check again. Oh, that ain't right. This one should be further like that. This is not something you can half do. It has to be 100%. I suppose this engine would run if they were 180 degrees apart. Just once you know it, you can't. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. Okay, so I just need to move this one out like so. There we go. This one's toward the front and this one's toward the bottom. And it's a square shaft, so it pretty much guides you to it. So one down, two more to go. I'm going to do the two other ones off camera. I've got my drivers all cleaned up. I'm going to take a minute to take a good look at this. This has a little bit of lint on it. It's not a lot, but these I mostly clean these with my fingers. This is the eccentric crank and its rod and the little lever. And then you have the main rod. So I mostly clean them with my rag and my fingers. And I don't think there's any need for any lubrication on here. This is pretty good the way it is. And that's the trailing truck. That's not too dirty, but I'm still going to want to get in there. Now this conducts electricity. This brings electricity to your locomotive. So it's really important that you take care a little bit of the orientation of each wheel, because as you can see there's no insulator here, but there is an insulator on this side. So if you put this back like so, you're going to create a short circuit and then your engine won't be running. So it's important to keep track of that. And I'm going to do just a cleaning with my rag. This one's a little bit nasty, so we'll clean that right up. Dave Strains commented, cleanliness is next to godliness. So I thought that was pretty funny. It's just, it's just your train looks better. But of course, if you can't pick up electricity, you can't move. The worm gear, it's the same thing. I'm just going to put one little drop in there, and that's going to be good. It's all brass. All these bearings are brass, and the shaft is steel, but the bearings are brass. So that's also very high quality. And I'm also missing the front, the pilot truck. Fortunately, I've got my donor engine back here. So this donor engine, I saved 3 engines so far with that. One engine needed the eccentric crank. Another engine that needed the bottom plate. And also an engine that needed the bearings. So I saved 3 engines with this so far. I'm all depleted on the eccentric cranks there. But it did have the pilot truck. So I can save this one. So this one's already been cleaned. So I've got that. I think I'm just about done now. And I can go ahead and reinstall everything. Okay, we'll start with the motor. Gonna put the little worm gear back on the motor. That's pretty easy to do. And then I'm gonna put the 2 frame halves together, close anyways to being together, but I have to put the motor in there. Do you remember the orientation of the motor? If you stick it like that, it will go the same direction as all your other engines. But if you stick it like this, it will go the opposite direction. So now's the time to be mindful of that. I'm just gonna set it just like so, and then bring my other frame half. Don't forget there's an insulator that goes here that while the screws are loose, you have a chance to bring it in. And then I'm gonna squeeze this together very gently, just making sure everything's lined up properly. And that doesn't look too good, so I've got a chance now to work on it. So I'm gonna pass my wire very closely to how they passed before, which is on top of the cab here, just like so. So again, I'm taking my time because I do not want to redo this tomorrow. Now I'll just start my screws. You can still have a little bit of wiggle room here. You want this lined up perfectly, and then you can tighten your screws. I'm always checking my wire because I want it to be perfect. So let's put a little bit of pressure, tighten the screw, and then also I put this up before I tighten everything. So that's just right. Every time that I add something, I will test it just to make sure that it's whisper quiet, and it is, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. I've got the little worm gear protector. That just snaps in there. That looks pretty good. There, perfect. And then I can start bringing the wheels in. Now as you put them in, you will have to time them. So for we're putting in the first one, so timing it for the first one, it won't make any difference. Just put it to wherever you feel comfortable. You can tweak it by turning the motor just a little bit. You can tell there's quite a bit of reduction on this. And then I'll bring in the number 3 driver. This is your main driver. It's got a thicker counterweight compared to the number 3 and the number 2. And the advantage of that is it has your excenter crank on there, and this hole here is square. These are round. And that is for the excenter crank. It'll stay in its spot. The hole is square, so there's only 4 places where it can go. You can see my timing's off, so I have to bring it up a little bit till I got them lined up perfectly, and then I'll bring it down. I have to pass it through a couple more teeth. There, that looks pretty good. The engine, when it's going forward, it will take up a little bit of that slack. So actually take that into consideration. That looks pretty good. And I'll do the same thing for the number 3 driver. Now I've got them lined up properly, I'm going to bring the pin for the number 3 driver. Usually I will use the crank as a tool to help me bring in the pin. So I have to go up one more little hump. Oh, almost got it. As you can see, the pin is very small. So then you will know if you have patience. And then I'll just punch it in with my nail like that. So I do the same thing on the other side. But before I do, I suppose I could bring in my bottom plate. It'll keep the gears from falling out again. That would be smart. I don't tighten these too much on this at this point, because I'm going to bring in the pilot truck and the trailing truck later on. But first let me work on these pins, and then I'll check it just to make sure that everything's together, because what's different from this to a static model is this has to run. So that is a big challenge on top of making it look good. And it does look good. I could even go try it on the track like that. Yeah, let's do that. That's gonna be fun. To go on the track, you will need your weights. Pretty important. On these two, I have to line up the wires properly. There's a groove in there where the wires can go. So you make sure that you got them lined up properly in that groove. Those two tabs are pretty strong. So it's gonna run. Sometimes it stalls still. I think it's because the number 1 and number 3 drivers have traction tires. See, it's stalled now. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna replace the number 1 driver with a driver from my parts engine that does not have a traction tire. That should help power pick up tremendously. This engine's in beautiful shape. I've seen them where these tabs are broken off, or the little ladders. This one, everything is mint. And even the tender looks really good. So I will bring this in. And then there's just 2 snaps in the back. And that's it. You're done with that. We're gonna put back these things, which are called the main rod and the eccentric crank. We're gonna put these back. They go just like that on this tab here. Actually, I think this is the other side. We'll do this side here. So the tab goes on here. I'll try to get a little bit better light for you guys. The little tab goes right on here. And that's it. That's how that goes. And then this little guy, which is the rest of the valve gear and the beginning of the cylinders, goes over those 2 tabs. Doesn't have to be very tight, just squeeze it in with your fingers. And that's that. Then we'll put our main rod with the cylinders. That goes like so. Not super hard to put in. It basically lines itself up. It's not very hard to do. There we go. And then we'll put the eccentric crank in it. Just like so. And then the eccentric crank, that's got a timing to it. The eccentric crank, how I see it, is you take the counterweight, should be exactly parallel to the counterweight, but you take away half a degree, and the place where it goes is square, so it will pretty much line itself up where it wants to go, and that will be good. Just have to bring it back half a turn, not half a turn, 15 degrees or so, and then it will just line itself up in the square hole, and that will be that. Just like so. The other side's the same thing. So you put your steam chest in first, and then your pilot beam with its little screw. And that's plastic on plastic, so it doesn't have to be very tight. It's really starting to shape up now. And then we'll remove this bottom plate. Then the trailing truck and the pilot truck. Yeah, it's really starting to shape up now. And then the counterweight, and then the shell. While I'm doing that, I'm looking out for the wires. I want them to be specifically in a good place. Like I said before, I don't want to be doing that again tomorrow. Just making sure that everything's lined up. If it is, the little screw would go on there nice and easy. Oh yeah, it's in now. So that looks good. The wires are managed in a decent way. But before we run some trains, I want to do a little bit of fine tuning on. I've got a ton of old Rossi Santa Fe heavyweights, but they all need a little bit of TLC, so I'm going to be doing that right now. Now these are for sure 40 plus years old. Let's just take a look at them. These are the old Atlas Rossi from years ago. This one's, everything's good about this one, so that's fine. No need to do anything. So there was 4 different freight cars you could have, all with their specific interiors. So this one's the Pullman car. you can look inside by just lifting the roof and the windows. You just lift the roof and the windows. You can look inside. They all have different interiors. There's 4 of them available. And we'll just check them all out just to make sure. This one I got in with a lot. Somebody tried to weather them. They're far from perfect, but I still use them. And then what's this one? This one is the observation. The observation, I put a microtrans conversion on that. This one too, in very good shape. That nothing's needed to do on here. The observation. What this one? I think this one is the diner. Nothing is finer than dinner in the diner. So this would be the kitchen area, and then all the tables and chairs. You can see the little chimneys here. They go over the kitchen, of course. So with that box, everything's fine. I don't need to do anything. There's 4 of them. We got the observation, the Pullman, the diner, and there's an observation. So this observation, it needs a little bit of work, as you can see. And that too has its own interior. These are probably 40 plus years old. So you can see a little bit of, this one I'm gonna have to put trucks on it. That's why I have it on my workbench. Check the other ones, maybe there's other ones that have problems. This one looks pretty good. That's another diner. Nothing bad to say about that. This one too, Pullman, but work is needed. What's this? What's this? This is a PMI car, but I like it. I use this all the time. So this one is just a coach. PMI, that makes the grade. Here's another Pullman. I keep these around because they are good. And then another observation. This one actually a little bit better shape than the other one. So I think I'm going to run this observation today. This one has a broken coupler. So here's a little extra bonus for you guys that stuck around. How to change the couplers on the River Rossi passenger cars. Even if you have streamlined cars, it's the same process. You just need to remove the roof. And then take out the middle wheel. If you have a streamlined car, there's no middle wheel, so that makes it easy. And there's a little weight here. That's the only weight that these cars have. And that screws on to the truck screw. And then that shouldn't be too hard to remove after that. Might be stuck on there somehow. Some of these have lighting kits actually. They're really cool. You might not need to remove this wheel. However, I'm going to just have a look, just to have better visibility at what's in there. So these, they're called Rapido for a reason, because the Rapido company invented them. There's 2 tabs here that you can pry on. Now you have to be very careful, because the plastic changed over the years. So what I do is I just start them, and then I finish with my pliers. So I don't put too much strain on the coupler box. I have had them where the coupler box would just break. So I go with my pliers, take my time, make them as straight as I possibly can. And then very gently I'll push them out. And I mean very gently. It's to the point where I hate to work on these. I avoid it if I can, because the plastic gets brittle after 40 years. So that's going well. So I'll just pull it out. There's a little spring in there, so you don't want to lose that. I'm going to angle it so I'm going to be in and out of there very quickly. I just have to bring in my replacement coupler. I've got a box of couplers, so I tried to find one that's similar. The little pin goes on the bottom, and then I'll just bring this in to where it should be, and I'll put my little retainer back on. Actually, I'll straighten it even further before I put it back. Yeah, in my collection, I've got quite the assortment. I've got like the latest Katos, and I've got a stack of these River Rossies. Incidentally, there's only 4 different cars, because the Atlas 462, I think if it pulls 4 cars, it's done its job. Yeah, test it out to make sure that everything runs, and then that can go back in its original placement. So I'll put that wheel back on. Put the wheel back on, so save me the trouble of later on. I always check them to see if they roll. Yeah, these are pretty good. The Atlas 462, it did not have a ton of pulling power, so to optimize that is good. That's the fine tuning that I do. I make sure that all my wheels roll freely. So all these cars together, that's quite a big train. And I keep the Rapido couplers. My CP train, it's got heavyweights like that. And I'm using a lot of micro trains, but the rest of them, rest of these old River Rossies, they got all Rapidos. I've got one car that has a fake knuckle coupler if I need it. So yeah, check it to make sure that it rolls properly. That seems pretty good to me. So that one car is done, and that's that. That's how you replace the coupler on the River Rossi passenger cars. And now that my passenger cars are tip-top, and now it's time to run some trains. All aboard! Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly had fun making it for you. See you soon.